One question I get asked a lot is how to take raw 3D prints like this and turn them into something smooth like this. Getting your props ready for paint can be a long process, but it is worth it. If you take the time and sand them down properly, you can get a really good finished product. But it takes more than just painting and sanding. How do we get a product like this, and how do we do it using materials that we get here in Australia? Let me show you how to take this and turn it into something like this.
First, we're going to look at how we fill all the cracks, seams and join lines. For this, you're going to need a few simple tools. You need a scraper, some sandpaper. I use 80 up to 100 grit. And then we're going to use this fine surface filler, which is a wood and plastic filler from Sika. You grab this at Bunnings. I think it's about $12 for a tube, roughly. Now, we do add some water later, and of course, you're going to need the prop that you're filling. I have gone in over this, as you can see in the color, using some spray putty, filler primer that I get from Super Cheap Auto. It's about $19 a tin. But you can see all the little seam lines still. You can see all the bits on the top where it's just built up the last few layers. And we're just going to fill those in, because filler primer is just not going to do that. But you do want to have at least 1 or 2 layers of filler primer first, and I'll show you why later. I use a respirator when I'm doing this, so please keep safety first. Any sanding or painting, it's always a good idea to use ventilation and a respirator. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab a nice healthy sort of helping of the Sika filler putty. And we're just going to go in on the areas that we know need a lot more attention first. So the seams, the different cracks, some spots where there might be little holes or divots, anything we want to really fill. Now, I don't follow the seam or the line. I go across it. This actually gets the putty to go directly into it more easily. If you follow the line, your finger can actually pull off the putty and you won't fill those gaps. So I'm just smearing it on here, as you can see. I come back later and I use a bit of a circular motion. This stuff dries fairly quickly. And it will dry quickly. Now, I don't want all these excess pieces. I don't want lots to have to sand off, as I just showed. So this is where your scraper comes in handy. This cleans it up and makes sure that the putty is only in the areas you want. Try and clean it up and make it as smooth as you can. And let's just speed this up. Now what I do is I use this excess and we're going to redistribute it in different areas. So the larger areas you can smooth pieces on, but again, you don't want to create too much of another rough surface you have to sand down. We're adding on that we're then going to take off later. So I use this circular motion, and you can come back with a bit of a wet hand. Again, I'm just going to put it where I see fit, and I'm going to smooth it out. I'm going to do the whole helmet in this, and when we get to that mohawk section, I'll show you what I do there. Okay, so now we're going to come into this top mohawk section. Now I've sanded off the other parts of the top of the print, but often prints like this, when you get to the top, the layers are a little more defined, and so you get that those really heavy layer lines that you saw building up before. So I'm going to use a nice healthy amount of this putty here, this Sika putty. What we want to avoid though is creating more dents, more ridges, and all the bits that you're just going to have to come back and sand, because this is harder then to fix up and sand later, because it is a more refined sort of dent, a more like obvious imperfection than what you get in your original 3D print. But this is easy to do. So again, we're going to put as much on as we can, or as much on as we feel comfortable, to really get rid of that indentation we see on the top there. That's the bit we're trying to fix up. And we're going to come back in and sort of scrape it all off. We'll use our finger to smooth it out. I'm slowly cleaning up the areas on the outside, making sure it's all still nice and smooth. And then we're just going to come back and do that circular motion again everywhere else. But here we're just going to come into the little bits. If I see any imperfections or anything, especially as it dries, I'll just wet my fingers and come back, use the excess that I get on my fingers, somewhere else on the helmet, and then I just come back in and I smooth it over again. So you'll see me coming back and just smoothing it. It's like sculpting. We're just going to smooth away what we need to, use what we need to. We can even just spread it out into different areas together. So we can get one spot to meet up with another, and just keep going until you're happy with it. So here I'm just trying to avoid getting any of this putty where I don't want it. So in this mouth area and things, I don't want any putty building up there. It's harder to get rid of. So I'm just making sure it either doesn't go in or I clean it up. But here it is. This is the putty on it. Next we're going to come back once it's dry and we're going to start cleaning it up and sanding it back. But yeah, we want to get rid of these little imperfections I showed you before, so we can smooth it out a little bit more, but we can do that with a little bit of wet sanding and cleaning up later. Let's come back with some water and see what we can do. So this is where we're going to start using our sandpaper. Now I'm using 80 grit here, but I will work my way up to 100, 150 even later on, and I will keep going until I'm ready to sort of paint and until I'm happy with it. And that's the main thing with this. You just keep going until you're happy with it. This is not about anyone else. This is not about how other people see your project or look at your project. It's your project. You work on it until you're happy with it. So if you haven't done wet sanding before, there's a few benefits of it. One, it will keep any of the sanded product sort of down. It will pick it up onto your sandpaper a bit better, so you're not breathing in as much. But for this, the reason I said go in and do a layer or two of the filler primer first and now adding the putty is that when we wet this product, like you can see here, I'm just wetting it with my fingers, I'm reactivating the putty and I'm reactivating the filler primer just a little bit on the surface. It's actually blending them together. Now, if there's any little imperfections, little details that it'll see from the sandpaper itself, little scratches or marks, this will then automatically push it over those and fill in those little gaps. This is a great way to make sure your entire product is smooth. Now, we're going to come back with our sandpaper in a minute too. This is just getting that initial bit off. If we have a few lumps or bumps or little dents and imperfections in our putty that we applied before, this is just getting rid of those as well. This is a cleanup process right now. Alright, now that we've done that, we're going to add some more water to our sandpaper, making sure that our model is also a little bit wet where we're going to sand. And this is going to activate with the sandpaper those two layers that we've made. So the filler primer and the putty are now going to just smooth out as we sand into any little cracks, dents, things, and it just smooths out the whole product. This is where we also come in with our higher sandpaper later, and it will just smooth everything out. But right now, yeah, we're just looking at where we've got little bits we want to fill. We've already sort of filled in our creases and our seams. We're just going to be smoothing out those areas and making sure everything's nice and clean, everything's the same height, and getting rid of the evidence of those seams at all, essentially. The other benefit I said of using this wet sanding technique here at this step is that it does pick up a lot of those particles and those dust. Yes, the water on the product right now is stopping a lot of that from actually escaping, and it will clog up on your sandpaper. Just be aware. Alright, already guys, hopefully you should be able to see that where I've sanded and where I've been working is so much smoother than where we began. All the little details and dents that we wanted to fill in, all those layer lines that we see from 3D printing should be almost gone by now. Now this is just one stage. We are going to keep working before we get to paint. It is a long process, but it is absolutely worth it. Now you can use a Dremel, you could use a palm sander, you can use this. An electronic sander or a sanding bed if you want, or a belt. But I'm showing you here just how simple it is to use just a few different bits of sandpaper and just work at it. This whole process has taken me about half an hour all up, guys, from putty all the way through. That doesn't include the drying time. But I'm going to keep going on this, keep sanding away. The next step, after we've finished this, is that I'm going to come back with a couple of layers of the filler primer. I will show you the filler primer in the next video and which one I use. You get it at Super Cheap Auto. It's about $19 per tin. It's really easy to get your hands on. But I swear by it. It's fantastic stuff. A couple of layers on that. It dries really quickly, and then come back and wet sand it with 180 grit sandpaper, and we'll be ready for paint. Join me in the next video, guys. This was tomfoolery and how to use this putty from Seeker and our sanding process to get our prints from being nice raw 3D prints to being smooth and almost ready to paint. That's looking beautiful now. I hope this has been helpful for you guys. As I said, this has just been how to use a filler putty that you can get here in Australia. It's Seeker. You grab it at Bunnings. And just using this wet sanding method to get this print ready to go. Hope to see you in the next one.